So we've been covering what's going on in Iran, and part of that story includes that yesterday Donald Trump casually threatened war crimes against Iran on Twitter, threatening Iranian cultural sites as targets, which is a war crime per the Geneva Convention. It's very cut and dry. There's really no ambiguity about that. The question is, are the threats going to become actual orders? And if they become orders, what is the Pentagon, what is the military actually going to do? We have some good news if we can believe it, and the believability of it is something we'll talk about in a second. And the good news is that the Pentagon immediately said, no, we are not going to commit Donald Trump's war crimes. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper admitted yesterday, I mean, he didn't even try to deny that targeting Iranian cultural sites, if they are not otherwise military targets, targets of military value, crazy world we live in, right? If there is not a standalone military value to the cultural sites, it would be a war crime and that they would not do it. And this puts Mark Esper and the Pentagon directly opposite Trump, who insists that these are legitimate targets and actually doubled down on the war crime threat on Air Force One when asked about his completely unhinged tweets. The Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, said, quote, "We will follow the laws of armed conflict." Now, for like a split second, I kind of felt bad for a second for the people that have to deal with Donald Trump and clean up his messes. And then I remembered, hey, you can choose whatever job you want. They can quit at any time. And then I didn't feel bad for them anymore. But military leaders are in a position where they have to balance the law and reality and empiricism with what Donald Trump wants and what Donald Trump tweets. And Donald Trump often loses it when he does not get what he wants. Donald Trump threatening war crimes on Twitter appears to be disturbing not just international allies, which we talked about yesterday, but it's disturbing even our own military and our Pentagon and the Secretary of Defense. So I have a few thoughts on this. Number one, if indeed the Pentagon is honest in what they say, like if we can trust Mark Esper is telling the truth when he says we're not going to do it, these are war crimes, then that's good. But can we believe Mark Esper? Are they just saying this? Because historically, the United States doesn't announce one way or the other when its military is going to be committing war crimes. We often find out later, many times thanks to investigative journalism, document leaks, sometimes FOIA requests are part of it. So this is sort of uncharted territory where in advance, the president is saying, here's an idea, let's commit some war crimes. I have a list of war crimes targets that I would like to see targeted. And then the Secretary of Defense says, no, those would be war crimes. We're not going to do it. This is a very backwards way in which this normally happens, but it's conceivable that getting this out into the open ahead of time actually makes it less likely by shining a spotlight on it that it eventually happens. Now, to keep going with this, if Mark Esper is telling the truth, and he can be believed, that the Pentagon, the military, will not be committing the war crimes that Donald Trump threatened, is Mark Esper's job safe? Because we've seen that when a Trump administration official publicly contradicts the word of Trump, very often they end up resigning, forced resignations, and Donald Trump pulls in someone who is much more willing to do his bidding, or at least shut the hell up about it and not make it clear that they disagree with Donald Trump. Number three, think about how insane things are today, that it is newsworthy that the Pentagon is ruling out war crimes preemptively, as suggested by the president on Twitter. This is the reality. This is a headline today in 2020. Number four, the fact that Donald Trump even threatened these war crimes is still disgraceful and potentially an escalating action. And Donald Trump is quickly moving from being an international laughingstock to being an international terror. And number five, let's not excuse the Republican Party at large. We're going to talk later in the show about how 20 people or even 14 people in the Senate and cabinet, respectively, could put an end to the worldwide fiasco that is Donald Trump. We'll get to that later. Not a single Republican member of the House or Senate have just said, I condemn Donald Trump casually threatening war crimes on Twitter. Not a single one, not one Republican. And that's part of why we're in serious trouble. That's part of why this guy might get himself reelected. Now, to get back to the war crimes for a moment, what will happen if Donald Trump gives the order? Does Mark Esper say no? Do the generals say no? In the United States, military orders are only considered valid if they are legal, if they adhere to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. That's a separate branch of legal code, and all U.S. military personnel are under oath to follow that. There's also the LOAC, the Law of Armed Conflict. There's the Geneva Conventions. And according to international humanitarian law, and I think with many Trumpists, if you say to them international humanitarian law, they just laugh, right? I mean, they don't care about that. According to international humanitarian law, officers are not to be punished if they refuse to carry out orders that are known or suspected to be illegal. An order to intentionally target cultural sites and cultural objects and locations lacking military value would absolutely fall under illegal, under that umbrella. I don't know what we would expect to happen. Technically, illegal orders are supposed to be disobeyed, or the perpetrator can be held accountable, just like that person giving the order. And in fact, there's historical precedent from this. You can go back to World War II, and the "I was just following orders" defense is one that is not valid. So I don't know. We're now getting sort of it's hugely depressing that we're even getting into this conversation to this degree, but this is the world in 2020 under Donald Trump. We have an opportunity to end at least part of it just 10 months from now. I hope that we will take that opportunity. We'll get a little bit later in the program to the spineless Republicans, 14 of whom could end this national tragedy and are choosing not to do that. But first, let's talk about Democrats trying anyway to control Donald Trump on Iran.